Elderly people in villages often say a saying, "When a tiger dies, it becomes wood, and when a human dies, it becomes a tiger." The meaning of this saying is that when a tiger is alive, people are afraid when they see it, but once it dies, no one fears it anymore. But when a human dies, other people become so afraid that no one wants to stay alone beside the dead body even for a moment. That is why we try to bury the body as quickly as possible. But in this world, there are some people who, after we bury the dead, in the deep darkness of night or under a pale moonlit sky, dig into the freshly covered grave with a shovel and steal the body. You may be wondering why I am saying all this. Then pay attention. Today, I will share a true incident of grave robbing. Many people may have seen or read news like this on television or in newspapers, but how many of us truly know the bitter experience behind such incidents? This story was collected for me by Salmik, and I give him countless thanks for sharing such an incident with me. The location and the names of the characters have been changed for privacy, and to everyone, I extend greetings of Halloween. The incident begins in the year 2008. In remote villages at that time, poverty was everywhere. Many people struggled just to have 2 proper meals a day. Driven by poverty, Anil chose this terrible path of earning money. A criminal group offered him a job. He would steal freshly buried bodies from graves and deliver them to a specific location, and for each body he would receive a good amount of money. He thought about it. In a life full of hardship, who would push away such a tempting offer? He agreed. But it was not possible to do this job alone, so he called 2 of his friends. When they heard about the good money being offered, they also agreed, and their work began. A river flowed through the middle of their village, surrounded by dense forests. Using a small wooden boat, they would travel along the river to reach distant graveyards. Whenever someone died in villages far away, they kept track of the news and attacked the grave at the right time, on dark nights or on nights with faint moonlight. They would dig up the grave, place the body into the boat, and deliver it to the designated place, finishing the job within a single night. And a good amount of money would end up in their pockets. This is how their grave robbing business continued. They had no exact count of how many bodies they had stolen. Even on nights of light rain, they dug graves and stole bodies without any problem. According to them, at first they felt fear doing this work, but later they no longer felt afraid. One day, they received news that a man had died in a nearby village. But the problem was that he had been buried in a very old graveyard close to a residential area. However, since they had not stolen any bodies in many days, their hands were empty and they were desperate for money. They decided they would steal the body at any cost. 2 days after the burial, it would be the night of the new moon, a night of complete darkness. They made their plan. Late that night, the 3 of them set out by boat carrying shovels, ropes, and a kerosene lantern. From their village, it was about a 30-minute journey by river. In the pitch darkness, they used the lantern because even with a small amount of light, they could still avoid being noticed by people. Since the graveyard was close to the residential area, they had to be careful. When they reached the graveyard, they got down from the boat and saw that it was filled with large old trees and thick bamboo bushes. They also had a small flashlight. Anil turned it on and saw that the trees were very old, covered with moss, and wild vines had wrapped around many branches. The whole place felt eerie and unsettling. Anil and the others tied the boat to the bank and walked into the deep darkness. Broken graves and bamboo clusters surrounded them. Here and there stood huge trees, some branches hanging low, almost touching the ground. They increased the brightness of the lantern, and in its light, the shadows of the trees looked like giant monsters. Soon they found the new grave. It was in an open space with very few trees around it. They placed the lantern beside them and began digging. At first, Anil dug for a while, then another one took over, while Anil sat beside the lantern watching. In the lantern light, the shadow of the shovel looked unusually large. After some time, Anil got up to walk a little to the side. Suddenly, his foot slipped into a broken grave and the soil collapsed, causing him to fall into the grave. Right after that, he felt something hard under his foot. He reached down with his hand and pulled out an object shaped like a disc. When he held it up in front of the lantern, it shined brightly. It looked like a golden-colored metal object, something valuable, similar to a school bell. But it seemed that two bells had been joined as one piece. Seeing it, greed filled his mind. He thought that in such an old grave, this must be something very valuable. Immediately, he hid it so the other two would not see. He wrapped it inside his clothes and placed it into his bag. Meanwhile, the digging was almost finished, and part of the white burial cloth was visible through the soil beside the canal. At that moment, they suddenly heard human voices and lights approaching. It did not take long to realize that people had discovered the grave digging. Out of fear, the three of them quickly grabbed their shovels and lantern and began running towards the boat. Anil, holding the lantern in one hand and the bag in the other, started running. But suddenly, in the darkness, he collided with a tree branch and fell to the ground. The bag slipped from his hand and the bell fell onto the ground.
When he tried to pick it up, he realized that one part of the bell was in his hand while the other part had separated and disappeared somewhere in the darkness. Meanwhile, the villagers were getting closer and he had no time to search. He quickly picked up the part he could find and started running again. Soon the three of them reached the boat and began rowing away. That night, they narrowly escaped being caught. Villagers came to the riverbank searching for them, but by then they had already disappeared into the darkness. After delivering the body to the designated place and explaining everything, they returned home as dawn was about to break. Anil went to his room and hung the bag in a corner from a bamboo pole, tying it to a metal hook. Leaving it hanging there, he fell asleep. In the morning, he woke up to his mother shouting. He stepped outside and saw his mother standing there, angry and confused. She said, "What were you doing all night? Everyone was surprised and staring at me." As his mother learned everything, he tried to mumble an excuse, but before he could speak, she said that the sound of a bell ringing all night had kept her from sleeping. Anil was shocked to hear this, because after returning home, he had gone straight to sleep and had not rung any bell. The next day, when he woke up again and stepped outside, he saw that several neighbors had gathered with his mother. All of them had the same complaint. They had not been able to sleep because of the constant sound of a bell ringing throughout the night. Everyone was very angry with him. He could not understand what was happening. They claimed that the sound came from his room while he slept peacefully, unaware of anything. After apologizing to everyone, he returned to his room. He took down the bag and looked inside. The bell was exactly as he had left it, with no changes. But when he tried to place the bag back, he was shocked to see several cockroaches and lizards lying dead on the floor directly beneath the bag. He felt surprised but ignored the matter. After finishing his daily work, he went to sleep again that night. Then he noticed that his pet cat had entered the room. As soon as he lay down on the bed, he turned his head and saw the cat sitting directly under the bag where the bell was kept, staring at it without moving. That night he fell asleep again. In the morning, there was once again noise outside. When he stepped out, he saw many neighbors gathered, furious. They said they could not sleep peacefully because the bell kept ringing all night. Hearing all this, he returned to his room and saw the cat still sitting in the same position under the bag, staring in one direction. Feeling uneasy, he gently pushed the cat with his foot. The cat instantly fell over. When he quickly picked it up with his hands, he realized the cat was dead, lying exactly as it had been, with its eyes wide open. Now Anil became truly terrified. He decided that he would stay awake that night to see what was happening. As planned, he lay on the bed pretending to sleep. Hours passed, and everything seemed normal. But as the night grew deeper, his eyes became heavy, and he could no longer keep them open. At some point, he fell asleep. Suddenly, a sound woke him instantly. It felt as if something was walking across the tin roof of his house, moving from one side to the other. Gathering courage, he got up and walked toward the bag. The bag was still in its place, but the bell was no longer inside it. Again, he heard the sound of something running across the roof. Anil rushed outside the house. In the dim light, he saw a dark figure moving rapidly from one end of the roof to the other before disappearing into the darkness. He was so frightened that he lost the strength to move. No sound came out of his mouth. Even with all his strength, he could not scream. It felt as if he was about to lose consciousness. Suddenly, a faint ringing of the bell echoed into his ears from inside the room. After that, he remembered nothing. In the morning, as soon as he woke up, he went straight to the bag. The bag and the bell were exactly as they had been before, with no change. But he clearly remembered that earlier there had been only the bag and no bell inside it. Desperate to be free from the bell, Anil picked up the bag and left the house. He walked to a lonely bend of a large river. Then slowly, he took the bell out of the bag and threw it into the middle of the river. At that moment, it felt as if a huge burden had finally been lifted from his mind.
Then he returned home, finished his daily work as usual, and went back to sleep. In the middle of the night, he woke up again to the same running sound on the roof of the house. He got up and saw that the bag was exactly where it had been, and the sound above the roof had stopped. Fearfully, Anil stepped down from the bed, one step at a time. It felt as if the bag was pulling him closer. He slowly moved toward it. With trembling hands, Anil reached out and grabbed the bag. The moment he opened it, a powerful chill ran down his spine. Inside the bag was that same bell, and water was still clinging to its surface, as if someone had just taken it out of the river. He had seen a simple bell before, but he never realized that an object like this could make a person feel such deep fear. He placed the bag back and lay down again, thinking about what he should do about this strange event. In the morning, after waking up, he decided to take the bell to the market to sell it. He sold the bell at a scrap shop and returned home. From that moment on, everything seemed normal, and there were no more problems. He thought to himself that finally the suffering was over and he had been freed from the torment. Exactly 7 days later, a young boy came running to his house in a panic, holding a bag in his hand. He arrived out of breath and asked for some water. After drinking water, he handed the bag to Anil. Anil took the bag and looked inside, and there it was, the same bell. The boy looked at him and said, "After this incident, my father brought this bell into our house. Since then, nothing in our family has been right." The boy began speaking in a trembling voice. He said that his father had placed the bell inside their room. Suddenly, one night, his father woke up after hearing the sound of something heavy walking across the tin roof. He went outside to check and saw something black moving quickly from one side to the other. His father became very frightened. He tried to scream and run, but at that very moment, something rushed toward him and pushed him. When we came outside, we found our father lying unconscious. We carried him into the room, and many of us held our father and brought him back inside. In that state, he had unbelievable strength, and even several of us together struggled to control him. With great difficulty, we managed to bring him into the room. He eventually fell asleep, but whenever he woke up, he tried to bite the hands and feet of whoever was near him and attempted to drink blood, repeating the same words, "The bell has returned." Later, we were forced to tie him to the bed. But every morning, everything became normal again. He had no memory of the things he had done during the night. He did not even believe us. The next night, my mother screamed again. I ran to her room and saw that the door was open and my father was missing. We took lights and went outside searching for him around the house. After searching, we found him running back and forth through a nearby forest. When he saw us, he tried to run again, but after great effort, we managed to catch him and bring him back home.
As soon as he returned, he demanded food and began eating an unusually large amount, far more than normal. Once again, we had no choice but to tie him up. After that, I took the bag containing the bell and kept it in my own room. That very night, I also heard the sound of something running across the tin roof, along with a faint ringing sound. The next morning, my father again remembered nothing from the night before. Everything seemed normal, and he behaved like himself again. Then I realized that all these problems were connected to this bell. After hearing your address from my father, I brought it back to you. You can keep this bell. There is no need to return the money. Still, please keep this bell with you. After saying these words, the boy placed the bell into Anil's hands and left. Anil fell into deep worry, wondering what he should do now with this bell and how he could finally escape from the curse of this haunted object.
Anil placed the bell in another empty room. 3 days later, he got another job to dig up a body. He had been sitting idle for a long time with no work and no money in his hands, so he decided to take the risk again. As soon as he made up his mind, he informed the 2 others that tonight they would go to another village where a new burial had taken place. The men agreed immediately. In the middle of the night, as planned, Anil arrived at the riverbank carrying the tools for digging graves. From a distance, he saw the 2 men already standing beside the boat. Anil approached them and climbed onto the boat. One of them pushed the boat away from the muddy shore, and they began moving forward. Above them, the full moon shone brightly, and small waves sparkled on the surface of the river. The moonlight seemed to float across the surroundings. The 2 men, who were usually very talkative during these trips, were completely silent today. Only the sound of the oars cutting through the water and the distant chirping of insects along the riverbank could be heard. Breaking the silence, Anil began to speak, asking why they were sitting so quietly and not saying anything tonight. One of them replied only, "Row the boat properly." Anil felt uneasy because they were not looking at him while speaking. Normally, when they traveled together, they joked and talked endlessly, but tonight, everything felt different. The boat continued drifting through the glowing moonlight, and in the distance, Anil noticed a patch of thick, dark shadow where the moonlight could not fully reach. He turned the boat toward that heavy darkness. As they got closer, he saw the faint outline of a bamboo grove. They stopped the boat beneath the bamboo trees, tied it to a stalk, and stepped onto the land. In front of them stretched a vast empty field that looked like farmland, but at that moment there were no crops. They walked quickly across the field. Under the moonlight, the darkness slowly faded and everything became clearer to Anil. In the distance, he saw another line of bamboo trees, and there lay the graveyard where a newly buried body rested. After reaching the graveyard, Anil moved to light the kerosene lantern, but one of the men stopped him and said there was no need to light it because the moonlight was bright enough to see. Anil noticed that if he stared into the darkness for a while, his eyes adjusted and he could see fairly well. The moonlight slipping through the gaps between the bamboo and trees made the area visible. He thought he would light the lantern when it was time to lift the body. Carrying the shovel on his shoulder, Anil walked toward the grave and began digging from one end. He pushed the soil aside again and again with the shovel. After some time, a bamboo mat covering the body became visible. Sweat poured down his body in heavy drops. He placed the shovel beside the grave and told one of the others to continue digging while he stepped aside to wipe the sweat from his face. He walked a short distance away. Because of the thick trees and bamboo grove, no lights from the village could be seen. Anil stepped out of the graveyard and moved slightly to the side, trying to see if any lights from the village were visible in the distance. But there was nothing, only deep darkness. A narrow dirt path stretched across the farmland, lined with trees on both sides. The moonlight made the surroundings look strangely frightening. A cold breeze touched his sweaty body, sending a chilling sensation down his skin. He sat for a while under a tree, trying to calm himself. After resting, he got up and returned toward the grave. Entering the grove again, Anil saw in the dim light that the digging was finished. The shrouded body was now visible, lying under the moonlight.
The fresh white burial cloth covering the body seemed to glow in the pale light. It looked as if the two men who had come with him were leaning over the body, searching for something inside the shroud. Anil walked toward the bag lying nearby and lit the lantern. Raising the brightness of the flame, he stepped closer to the grave. The two men were still bent over the body. As Anil approached, one of them slowly turned around. In the flickering light of the lantern, Anil saw something that froze his blood. The man was biting into the flesh of the dead body, tearing skin from the leg with his teeth. A wave of icy terror rushed down Anil's spine. The two men suddenly looked completely unfamiliar to him, as if they carried a dark and terrible secret. Then they turned their faces toward him and spoke in a chilling voice. "The bell has returned." The sound of that voice felt like it pierced straight through his heart. Dropping the lantern, Anil began running for his life.
He rushed past the bamboo grove and across the open field, running toward the river. Suddenly he saw one of the men standing in front of him again, smiling and repeating the same words, "The bell has returned." Terrified, Anil turned and ran in the opposite direction. He remembered that he had a friend living in that village and he began running toward his house. After running some distance, he reached a pond shining under the moonlight. He kept running, sweating heavily, his heart pounding so violently that it felt as if it would burst out of his chest. As he reached the edge of the pond, he suddenly heard a loud splash. Something had fallen into the water from above. The water rippled violently and waves rushed toward the shore. In the moonlight, Anil saw something white floating in the middle of the pond. He stopped for a moment to look closely as it drifted toward him. His fear reached its peak when he realized what it was. It was a shrouded dead body. Nearly losing consciousness from terror, Anil started running again. As he ran forward, he saw a small house standing alone in the middle of the field. A faint yellow glow was coming from inside. Desperate for safety, Anil ran toward the house and began knocking loudly on the door. An elderly man opened the door, and at that moment, Anil felt as if life had returned to his body. As soon as he entered the house, he saw an elderly woman standing inside. The old man looked at him and asked why he was running and breathing so heavily. Anil replied only that he had seen a dead body floating in the nearby pond. Hearing this, the old man said that the pond was very dangerous and that coming there at night was not safe. He told Anil to sit and rest, saying he would go and check what had happened. The old man lit another lantern and walked out into the darkness. Anil remained seated on the bed while the elderly woman stood near the door, waiting for her husband. About 10 minutes passed. Then suddenly, a foul smell reached Anil's nose, a strong stench of rotting flesh. He opened the door and stepped outside. He noticed another room nearby, and the smell was coming from there. Inside that room, a lantern was dimly burning. Anil slowly walked toward it. In the flickering light, he saw two decomposing dead bodies lying on the floor in the middle of the room. The stench was so strong that it felt like his breath would stop. Overwhelmed with terror, not knowing what to do or where to go, Anil lost control and began running again. This time, he knew he had to reach the boat. He had to escape this place of death. He ran across the empty field toward the river where the boat was tied. He had no idea how long he had been running. His only thought was to get out of there alive. As he finally approached the river, he suddenly saw the two men chasing behind him. Their expressions were terrifying, as if they wanted to tear him apart like wild animals ripping into flesh. Anil jumped into the boat in a single leap and grabbed the oar, rowing with all his strength. After moving a short distance away from the shore, he realized he had made a terrible mistake. In his panic, he had climbed into the boat without noticing that there was a dead body lying inside it. Under the moonlight, he could clearly see the same buried body stretched across the boat. When he looked back toward the shore, he could still see the two men standing there, watching him. A cold wind blew across the river, lifting the burial cloth covering the body. From beneath the cloth near the feet, red blood slowly dripped down. Ahead, the faint glow of the opposite riverbank appeared under the moonlight. Suddenly, the boat struck something hard and Anil lost consciousness. In the morning, he regained his senses to the sound of people shouting. He was still lying inside the boat, surrounded by villagers. Members of his family were pouring water on his head. The sun was already high in the sky. After regaining consciousness, Anil learned that the man who had bought the bell from him had gone missing the previous night. In the morning, that man's dead body was found behind Anil's house. The body was torn apart, as if someone had ripped the skin from it piece by piece. Anil still had not told anyone about what had happened to him. A terrifying thought began to grow in his mind. Was it his turn next? With the return of the bell, would he now have to die? Fear shook his entire body, and a cold wave of terror ran down his spine. What are you thinking? The incident ends here for now. The bell has returned, but perhaps the real story is only beginning. From where did this mysterious bell come back, and what fate awaited Anil? These questions are now spinning inside your mind. Keep thinking about them, and to uncover all the secrets of this incident, wait for the next part of the story, because the next episode is coming very soon.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm about to share a series of events that defy explanation, things that happened directly to a man named Tanzid Hasan. I'm telling this exactly as he shared it with us in his own words. To start, you should know that these incidents centered around my home and happened to me personally. I'm going to share 4 specific encounters. I ask you to listen closely. Without further delay, let's get into it. It was late 2013. I was in the 4th grade. My father held a government job and had just been transferred to a new location. A new residential complex had sprouted up right next to his office. At the time, there were only 4 or 5 buildings. The layout was very open. Each building was about 40 to 50 meters apart. We moved into the 5th floor of a 6-story building, along with a few other families. Our block was about 50 meters from the main road. Even though the area was deathly silent at night, whenever a heavy cargo truck hit a bump on that road, the sudden thud would make my heart skip a beat. My experiences with the supernatural began in 2016. Back then, I was obsessed with paranormal radio shows. I'd listen to them late at night until I fell asleep, often recording them on my FM recorder to catch the parts I missed. At that time, I shared my room with my cousin, who worked for a company where his shifts rotated every 7 days, 1 week on days, 1 week on nights. Naturally, during his night shifts, I had to sleep alone. Our apartment was spacious: 3 bedrooms, a dining room, 2 bathrooms, 2 balconies, and a kitchen. My room was quite a distance from my parents' room. The first incident happened one night in May 2016. I was in 7th grade. My cousin was on night duty. I had stayed up late finishing schoolwork. I didn't check the clock, so I can't be sure of the exact time. I hadn't eaten dinner yet, and since my parents were already asleep, I served myself and sat down at the dining table. For some reason, I felt an intense wave of dread. The silence was absolute. I could hear the rhythmic tick-tick of the wall clock with unnerving clarity. As I sat eating at one end of the table, a violent, deafening crash shattered the silence. It felt as though an invisible, powerful hand had slammed down onto the table with all its might. Everything rattled. My glass of water tipped over with a thud. I looked around, but the dining room was empty. My skin crawled. I bolted to my parents' room, hoping I had just imagined it, but my parents were awake. They had heard that terrifying crash too. I didn't finish my meal. I just stayed in their room and fell asleep. The next morning, everything seemed normal. My cousin returned to the day shift, so for the next week I wasn't alone at night, and my fear faded. I convinced myself it was a one-time thing, but I was wrong. That was only the beginning. A few months later, the second incident occurred. Same setting. It was about 1:10 a.m. I had finished studying, and my cousin was at work. My parents were asleep. The memory of the previous incident was weighing on me, and I felt uneasy. I decided to go wake my mother. To get to her room, I had to cross the dining area. In the dim light, I saw a figure. My mother was sitting at the far end of the table, dressed in white, with a light veil over her head, looking down.
I felt a surge of relief. I wasn't alone. But as I stepped into the room, I noticed it was freezing. The balcony doors were shut, and there was no reason for such a chill. Since my food had gone cold, I said, "Ma, can you heat this up for me?" There was no response. I asked again, "Please heat it up. I'm going to the washroom to freshen up." I heard a low, guttural groaning sound. I assumed she was getting up to help. I spent about 7 or 8 minutes in the bathroom, and when I came out, the dining room lights were still off. In the shadows, I saw her again, but she had moved. She was now sitting in the chair right next to mine, still looking down. I didn't say anything. I went to my room, grabbed my towel, and as I walked back into the dining room to flip the light switch, which was right behind where she was sitting, the cold became unbearable. I couldn't understand how one spot could be so icy. With my towel still over my face, I reached for the switch. The moment the light flickered on, I turned around. The chair was empty. There was no one there. She had been sitting right there a second ago. How could she have vanished so silently? I checked the kitchen. Empty. I went to my parents' room and found the door locked from the inside. There was no way she could have made it back and locked the door without me hearing a single sound. I wasn't even scared yet. I was just confused. I sat back down to eat, but when I touched the food, I recoiled. It wasn't just cold. It felt like it had been sitting in a freezer for hours. I knew it had been sitting on the table covered, not in the fridge. My frustration boiled over. I ate a few bites and went to bed. The next morning, I snapped at my mother. "I asked you to heat the food and instead you put it in the freezer. Why?" She looked at me baffled. She said, "What are you talking about? I didn't get up once last night and I didn't put the food in the fridge. It was on the table."
I didn't believe her. "Think back, Ma. You were sitting there in a white dress." She looked at me seriously. "I don't even own a white dress anymore." The blood drained from my face. My mother realized I was terrified. Soon after, they called a cleric from the local mosque. He performed a ritual and hammered 4 nails into the corners of each room to seal the house. My sister was on the way, my mother was pregnant, and they didn't want to take any risks. But the questions haunted me. Who was sitting there? Why did they appear as my mother? And how did the food get that cold? Years passed. It was now late 2021. My cousin had married and moved out, so I was sleeping alone again. We were repainting the house, and the nails the cleric had installed were removed so the painters could work. They were eventually thrown away. Immediately, things started happening again. Water taps would turn on by themselves. My bookshelf would suddenly start shaking for long periods. I tried to stay brave. I'd tightly capped my water bottle before bed, only to find it wide open in the morning. While studying, I'd feel 2 eyes staring at me through the window. These small things still happen to this day. Then came January 2022. It was just after the Maghrib prayer. My father was at the mosque and my mother had taken my sister for a walk. It was getting dark. I went to the kitchen to wash my plate. I didn't turn on the light, relying on the ambient glow from the other rooms. As I focused on the plate, I felt something near my waist. You know how you can sense movement in your peripheral vision? Without turning my head, I focused on that sensation. I clearly saw the head of a small child standing right beside my hip, looking up at me with a sorrowful, pleading expression. It looked like it wanted food. I was terrified that if I looked directly at it, I'd lose my mind. I slowly backed out of the kitchen, keeping my eyes forward. Once I hit the doorway, I dropped the plate and ran out of the house to wait on the stairs until my mother returned. I didn't tell her then, thinking it might have been an optical illusion. Later, we went back in together. The plate was on the floor, but the kitchen was empty. I stood in the same spot, trying to recreate the vision, but there was nothing. Yet I knew what I felt. That child was right there, wanting something from me. The final story is the most harrowing. By mid-2022, I had exams coming up and had started praying more regularly. My father had a habit of calling me for the Fajr prayer. He would keep calling until I answered him. One night, I fell into a deep sleep. I heard my father's voice calling my name for prayer. I opened my eyes but felt lazy, so I stayed still, waiting for his second call.
but the second call never came. The house was silent. As I swung my legs off the bed, I was hit by an overpowering scent of attar, traditional perfume. It was intense. I wondered if my dad had put some on, but then I remembered the bottle he bought during Ramadan had finished weeks ago. As I walked toward the bathroom, the scent faded, but the moment I stepped back into my room, it hit me again, stronger than ever. I ignored it and spread my prayer mat on the floor to the right of my bed. My bed is the type that is open underneath, no drawers, just empty space. As I stood in prayer, the smell of attar became so thick it was dizzying, as if someone had spilled a whole bottle on the floor. During the second prostration, sajda, I noticed a movement to my left, under the bed. The dim nightlight cast enough of a glow for me to see a long, white, cylindrical object lying horizontally under my bed. Curiosity got the better of my fear. After finishing my prayer, I slowly leaned over to look under the bed. What I saw stopped my heart. Under the bed, illuminated by a strange, sourceless light, lay a body wrapped completely in a white burial shroud, a kafan. A loose piece of the fabric was fluttering in a non-existent breeze, the movement I had seen earlier. I couldn't move. My body felt like lead. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The scent of attar coming from the corpse was suffocating. I felt a massive weight pressing down on me, pinning me to the floor. I was drenched in sweat. I began reciting verses of the Quran in my head, and with a sudden burst of adrenaline, I lunged onto my bed, tearing the mosquito net in the process. I grabbed my phone. The time was 2:33 a.m. It wasn't even time for Fajr yet. So who had called me in my father's voice? I played a recitation of Ayatul Kursi on YouTube, paralyzed by the thought that a corpse was lying right beneath me. I eventually drifted into a fitful sleep. A while later, I heard my father's voice again. This time, I was terrified. Was it really him? I didn't answer. He called again, walked into the room and turned on the light. There was no scent of attar. I told him I wasn't feeling well, and he left. In the morning, I didn't have the courage to look. I asked my sister to check if there was any sack or bundle under my bed. She said it was empty. When I finally looked, there was nothing there. I have never shared these stories before today. Who called me before dawn? Where did that scent come from? And how did a shrouded body end up under my bed? I don't have the answers, but I'll leave you with this. Before you go to sleep tonight, take a look under your bed. Check the corners of your room, because just like me, you might find that you've been lying right on top of something that should have been buried long ago. Check now. Is it there? I have more stories, and they only ever happen to me, never the rest of my family. I think I've figured out why. I'll share that in my next update. Until then, stay safe, and especially at night, be careful.